College graduation season is upon us, which means there's going to be a whole group of new people starting their very first full-time jobs. And when I was in this position, personally, I was scouring the internet trying to figure out what I was going to do with the money that I was making. I had never seen this much money before, and I had no idea how to budget, what I should be doing, where I should be putting my money. So I'm here to tell you 5 things not to do financially when you start your first full-time job after college. First, don't go right out and buy yourself a brand new car. I know it's very tempting. You're making all of this money. You've never made this much money before. And yeah, you want to show it off. You want a new car, but take a step back for a second. And first, you need to make sure that you can afford that car. Even if you can afford a brand new car, it's not always the smartest decision to buy one that's brand new when you can get a used one for just a couple thousand miles for so much less. I think it's super easy to say, well, I can afford it, I'm going to do it. But just because you can afford it doesn't mean it's the most financially smart decision. The car that I really wanted when I graduated was a Toyota RAV4 in the color Lunar Rock. Specifically, I wanted the adventure version. But when I was looking into it, it ranged from like $30,000 to $40,000, and I just knew that that wasn't going to fit into my budget. So, because I was so determined to get this car, I did a lot of deep diving, searching on the internet, trying to figure out how I could get a used one. And finally, I found one for around $22,000 that I knew I could afford, and I went and saw it. It definitely had its issues. It was a rental car before, but I knew that it was in good working condition. There were some cosmetic flaws, but other than that, I knew it wasn't going to break down on me. So if I had gone out and bought this car right away when I was like, I want this car, I'm gonna go buy it, I would have spent like $40,000 on it instead of waiting, doing my research, trying to find a used one, and instead paying $22,000. I saved myself $18,000 right there. Number 2 is don't forget to contribute to your retirement accounts. The best way that I can say to do this is you get your first job, make those elections immediately. Contribute to your HSA, 401k, Roth IRA, and do it right away, because if that money is gone from the start, you're not going to miss it. If you wait a couple months into getting this regular paycheck that you're expecting, it's going to be a hit. You're going to feel like you're not seeing the same money, feel like you're making less. When you're not making less, the money is going to something important, but at the same time, it's going to feel like less money because it's less money in your pocket for you to be spending. I've seen this with a bunch of my friends that they're like, I don't know how to start, I don't know where to go. And really the best advice that I can give you is just start. If you have a 401k through your employer and they're giving you some kind of match, take that match. If you're going to contribute anything, just make sure that you are getting the maximum match that your employer is going to give you. For your Roth IRA, there are so many great ones out there. Currently, I use Betterment just because I liked the platform. But if you just Google Roth IRA, it's going to come up with a bunch of them. Honestly, I don't feel like they're that much different besides just the platform and maybe the customer service options that they're offering for you. I'm currently maxing out my Roth IRA, and I've been doing that since I graduated college. So it's been about 3 years at this point. And it's probably been one of the best decisions I've made towards my retirement. The current contribution limit for those under 50 is $6,500 a year. So that means you're just taking $250 basically from each of your paychecks and putting it into your Roth IRA. With retirement accounts though, don't forget to actually invest the money that you're putting into the account. I've seen all of these people being like, why isn't my retirement account growing? And I didn't realize this because when I contributed into my Roth IRA and 401k, they automatically go invest it for you. I didn't have to make any elections, but all of them are different. So if you're currently investing into a retirement account, make sure that that money is then being invested for you. Because if not, you're not taking advantage of that compound interest that you could be making from the age of 21, 22 until retirement. And it's just sitting there, and that's not going to start until you realize it could be 5, 10 years down the line. And you're going to miss out on so much money if you forget to do that. Number 3, and this is a huge one that I see all the time, is you really shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your income on rent. I know that with the times at the moment, sometimes it's not possible to live in the city that you're living in and be paying less than that. And those are outliers, okay? That's not all of the time. The thing that I see is that people are like, oh, I got my big adult job, I'm gonna have a nice apartment. And whoa, we gotta take a step back. It's okay if you can't afford that nice big luxury apartment. You don't have to ball out. Again, I definitely fell victim to this when I got my first job. I was like, okay, what is 30% of my income? I'm going to be spending that on an apartment. So I went out, looked at all the apartments at that price, and I found some that were really nice, but then I looked a little bit lower and I was like, oh, I could get basically exactly this, but for less. So why wouldn't I try to save money and go and find a cheaper apartment? And right now, I'm not even spending 30% of my income on rent because I shopped around and found the cheapest option for me. I think it's so easy to look at your peers and say, well, they have the nice apartment and they have this and they have that, but you don't know their entire story. I've seen that a lot with people. I'll go to their apartments and it ends up being that their parents are subsidizing that rent. So don't compare yourself to others if you don't know the full picture there. And if you can help it, don't spend more than 30% of your income on rent. Number 4, and this one's kind of in a limbo at the moment, but don't neglect your student loans. This one also depends on if you have private or public federal loans, because if you have federal loans at the moment, depending on everything that's going on with the Supreme Court and all of that, I wouldn't be throwing all of your money at it just yet because we're not really sure what's going to happen there. And if you end up paying off your loans and then they get forgiven, you're going to be kind of bummed out about that. But if you have private loans that aren't eligible for forgiveness, you have to make sure that you're really on top of those. If you work somewhere where you get a bonus at work or commission on top of your salary, what I found was most helpful is that when I got a bonus at work, I would immediately put 50% of that towards debt. So in my case, it was student loans. And student loans that I knew weren't going to be forgiven. So I had one private loan that wasn't eligible for forgiveness, and it wasn't put on the same federal pause, so I was paying $50 a month for that. I got a bonus at work. I immediately went and paid that off, so I just didn't have to think about it anymore. It's so easy to think like, oh, well, right now I'm young, I want to live my life. But at the same time, you always kind of have that looming like, oh, I have to pay off my student loans, I have this debt, how am I ever going to do it? And it's so much easier to start now, start chipping away at it, because just think about how free you will feel when you have no student debt at all. It has to be one of the best feelings. I don't know what it feels like, but I cannot wait until I'm at that point. And now, because of the federal pause, we're kind of in a weird point that for the past couple years, I have been bad about this. I should have been saving the amount every month that I knew I was going to, or I would have been paying to my loans anyway. And so that when the pause was lifted, I could immediately pay that towards my loans. But I haven't been doing that. And it would be so much easier if I had been. But now, if you're someone that just graduated, you're not going to have that same amount of time with the pause. So make sure you have enough money when the pause starts back up. I believe it's end of August to start paying on those loans. And the last one, number 5, that everything kind of wraps into is don't think that you're making too much money to have a budget. Everybody needs a budget. Lifestyle creep happens so easily when you feel like, oh yeah, I can afford that, I'll do that, and I can afford that, and I can afford that. But then eventually you're paying $3,000 a month for rent, and you have a $200 a month gym membership, and you have a $700 car payment. That adds up so fast, and before you know it, you're living paycheck to paycheck. How I like to lay out my budget is the 50-30-20 rule. Usually it's 50% for needs, 20% for savings, and then 30% for wants. But I switch it up a little bit. I do 50% for needs, 30% for saving, and 20% for wants. I did this as soon as I graduated before I started my first job so that I knew right away what I had the money for and what I was going to be saving money on, instead of doing it retroactively and saying, oh my God, I'm spending all this money on this category and I can't afford it and now I have to cut back. It's better to kind of know your boundaries in the first place so that you can stay behind them instead of having to rein yourself back in. I would get so many comments on the internet when I would talk about my salary and budgeting before I was laid off when I was making $115 a year. And yes, that is a lot of money. But people all the time would be like, why are you budgeting? You don't need to budget when you're making that much money. And yes, if I want to achieve my goals in the future, I have savings goals, I have to budget. Because if I didn't have a budget, I'd be throwing money everywhere and I wouldn't be working towards those goals. So budgets are so incredibly important. Everybody needs one. And it's okay if you don't stick to it every single month. It's more of like a baseline to kind of stay around. Now that we've gotten through all of those things that you shouldn't do, I do have one thing that I want you all to take away from this. No two financial journeys are going to be the same, and you want your money to work for you and your goals, so everybody's goals are going to be different. We see financial gurus all the time saying like, save, 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 you have to buy a house, this is what you need to do, you can't buy iced coffee. And that is not true at all. Yes, I think saving is very important to reach your goal. It might not be buying a house, it might be traveling, it might be having a wedding, it might be, maybe you don't have any major financial goals. Maybe you just want to buy an iced coffee every day. And if you can afford that and you're doing everything else right, you're able to put money into savings, you're paying off your debts, you can afford to buy an iced coffee every day, go ahead, you get that iced coffee every day. If your financial goals are different than someone else's, your journey to get to that goal is also going to look completely different. So don't feel like if you're not doing it the way that someone else is doing it, you're doing it wrong, because there are lots of different ways to financial plan, save, budget, invest, all of those things. When I had just graduated college, I had no idea what I was doing financially, so I was also deep diving on YouTube trying to figure it out for myself. So I hope that these 5 things helped you all to start your financial journey after college. This is such an exciting time in your life and one of the most important times to get your financial situation right. If you all have any comments or questions about finances or really anything in general, please feel free to leave it in the comments.